right, so we're ready to get started. Good afternoon. My name is Douglas Kellner, and I'm co-chairman. I'll ask the other commissioners to introduce themselves.
Jim Walsh, Gregory Peterson.
Evelyn Aquila.
And the staff who are present identify themselves.
Bob Bren.
Liz Hogan.
Bill McCann.
George Stanton.
John Conklin.
Pat Campion.
Anna Savitsura.
Joe Burns.
Paul Collins.
Kim Galvin.
Todd Valentine.
And our guests, please.
Amy Aldo, League of Women Voters of New York State. Meredith Bernzel, White Master Montana.
Frank Malatesta.
Greg Jones, the Commissioner on Quality of Care and Advocacy for Persons with Disabilities.
Bob Brunsmack, Nysboe. Bill Saxon, Nysboe.
Joe Adler, State Independent Living Council.
Bob Warren, Election Operations.
Terry Reigns, Election Opposition.
All right, well, thank you all for coming. The first item on our agenda today is the approval of the minutes for May 11th. The minutes have been distributed. Are there any corrections?
No.
So is there a motion?
So moved for approval.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are adopted. The next item are the unit updates. We'll start with the executive directors, Robert Brehm and Todd Valentine.
One of the larger issues that impacted us in our last period of time since our last meeting was the completion on-site of the federal HAVA audit. It's something we knew would be coming one day when we accepted the federal funds, and they said that they could be on site from 5 to 6 weeks, and it really was about less than 2 weeks, I think, from the time they actually started. So we thought that was a good sign. We won't know for sure until we get their written report, but their exit audit with us, they do tell you what they're working on, but more importantly, we asked them what did they notice that stood out as being good news. And one of the things they really mentioned to us was the on-site visits to I think it was 10 counties that Joe and Anna's unit helped coordinate from Suffolk County to Erie County and places in between. And they had mentioned that they were very impressed with the organization, the asset tracking, the ability to know where all the equipment was, the security of the sites they visited was very, very positive. So I thought that was a good indication. They liked the fact that the way New York State approached this by creating the statewide contract and to run the reimbursement for those other funds like education and training through the state. They provided information to OGS as to what random purchase orders they wanted to see. They could see all the documentation, and it really made for a very concise period of time that they had to be here in order to look at things. So, we're waiting for their written report and have a chance to review it and comment on it. But so far, I think it was very positive, and more importantly, no surprises. Just in general, we continue to work on other issues. The agency, I know the Election Commissioner Conference is this week. We are going for the State Board presentation this Thursday afternoon. So we have a number of workshops planned for that, for various people here from the board to answer the questions that the county commissioners asked us to cover, both from a HAVA update to a legal update and other issues related to the current list of items on their agenda.
Anything else?
No, that about covers it. That's good.
All right, well, thank you. So we'll move to legal. Kim Galvin.
Thank you, Commissioner. There's just a few things to add to our written report. Basically, at this time of year, oftentimes the council's office will work with the election operations unit to review the documents that come in with regard to the nominations or the petitions. We did have occasion to review all the statewide nominating documents, and we deemed them, Anna may speak to this, we deemed them all sufficient. There were no objections filed. That's why you don't have a prima facie report to rule on this afternoon. But I anticipate from the meetings moving forward that you'll have some items to deal with in that regard. And another, the only other thing is that the legislature has passed a significant number of bills that have affected the board or the election process, and we have, as a group, as an agency, monitored what's come out of those things, and Paul has worked to pre-clear any of those items that we think need to be pre-cleared through the Department of Justice's process. And other than that, you know, it's the very busy questions and answers given with regard to the election process that's getting very much underway. And we've been very busy, and Paul, I'll ask Paul to speak specifically to the updates with regard to particularly the Nassau County litigation that we have. And he can give you, there's been quite a bit of activity, he can give you an update with regard to that. Paul?
With respect to our pre-clearance, we are current through Chapter 129, which was just signed the other day. All of the legislation which in any way, shape, or form affects the electoral process in New York has gone to DOJ for pre-clearance. The monumental legislation changing the date on which the enrollment figures have to be out every 4 years has been pre-cleared. The rest of it we haven't heard back yet from. We also have submitted all of the policies and procedures necessary to convert to the electronic voting system for pre-clearance as well. With respect to the litigation brought by the Department of Justice to compel New York to comply with HAVA is progressing. An offshoot of that litigation was an application made to Judge Sharp under the All Writs Act, which he granted, and issued a mandatory injunction against Nassau County, compelling them to roll out the new machines in September. Nassau has taken an appeal to the Second Circuit of that order, and I'm told by the Department of Justice that they are seeking a stay, which is not unusual, and they may well be seeking an expedited hearing, which would, again, not be unusual. We have not been served with papers on the stay as yet, but I'm sure they're coming, albeit the order was filed nearly a month ago. With respect to the second piece of litigation involving Nassau County, it's suit brought to challenge under state law grounds the constitutionality of IRMA. Judge Bianco remanded it back to Nassau Supreme on 14 June. So by my reckoning, we have till, I think, the 4th of July to answer or otherwise move with respect to that litigation. If you read Judge Bianco's decision, it's an interesting roadmap to the various defenses we would have in the state court proceeding challenging the constitutionality of IRMA, but he felt that they had limited their claims to state law issues, and he was not going to sustain federal jurisdiction on a removal basis. I don't think that order is appealable.
I'm sure it isn't. The email I sent you and the Thermotron and Southwest Bell rulings, but Paul, I guess the principal point that Judge Bianco made is that Judge Sharp's ruling was still res judicata, and that Nassau would be bound by that ruling.
Yeah,
that any state court judge hearing the proceeding would still have to make a determination in accordance with Judge Sharp's, or to make it consistent with Judge Sharp's ruling.
Could I ask Paul one question?
Sure.
Just a thought. Has any other state challenged the constitutionality of HAVA against their state?
Well, not,
I was just
not
curious
really,
if it happened
because there's
before.
this section of the Constitution, Article 6, Clause 2, the so-called Supremacy Clause, that would make that rather a fool's errand. Nassau County, and again, I don't presume to speak for Nassau
Of
County.
course not.
But they seek to split the hair, so to speak. They are asserting that while we must comply with HAVA as a matter of federal law, in Irma, the state legislature went too far in requiring that we abandon the lever machine system. And also they seek to assert that essentially the electronic voting system unlawfully delegates to a third party, not a member of the variant county board of elections, the task of counting the vote. I can't conceive that there's a difference between that argument and a concomitant argument that one would make. Isn't that what a lever machine does too?
Mhm.
But that's how they seek to split the baby, so to speak.
So no other state has ever done this?
Well, not certainly on the grounds of state
Yeah, okay.
constitutional issues.
Thank you.
And Paul, I wanted to clarify on the first point that that it was the commissioner's position, that it was really the Department of Justice that insisted that we make the formal all writs application to Judge Sharp, that the commissioners had proposed a more moderate course originally, and that DOJ had insisted that we needed to make it formal. And so the application, the application to get the formal order from Nassau County really was done at the instance of the Department of Justice.
It would appear, Commissioner, that that application has gotten their attention.
Yes. All right. And then I guess one last thing that was going on is that there's a much older lawsuit that the Justice Department had originally won under the NVRA that's really directed at the state university and
The SUNY CUNY one, yes.
and the college system. And you want to just briefly explain what's going on there? And I believe that it really doesn't affect the State Board of Elections, but I think the
some time
commissioner
ago,
should at least make it clear that we're not going to get.
DOJ moved and received summary judgment on the issues involved in the lawsuit. Specifically, the government's position was that under the NVRA, any state agency that provided disability services or any species of disability services had to be a reporting NVRA site. Some of our state universities were doing it on a voluntary basis. The government insisted that it be done on a mandatory basis. The judge issued summary judgment saying that both the SUNY and CUNY institutions, their Student Disability Services Office, had to be mandatory NVRA reporters.
And they also ruled that the community colleges, even though they were technically private institutions, if they received any state funding, the community colleges
Yes.
also had to be mandatory.
That's the big piece of it from
Right.
the education part of the
Right.
world, which is an interesting
So,
concept.
so right now, they're negotiating the text of the final order, and my view is that the State Board does not have any issues in that fight, that,
Well, I've circulated the proposed drafts. No one seems to have a problem with it because we're just going to receive the information. Yeah.
I think our only concern so far with the draft is, the training of the disability office
Bringing them in-
staff
bringing them
and the
into the system.
coordinators as to how we bring them into the system, whether or not they give us, enough time just to get that part done, but it's not certainly we can do that, it's just a matter of
I think everyone in this
coordinating the
agency
timing.
is committed to the concept of full voting rights for all citizens.
Sure.
Yeah.
Paul, I'm interested in another quick thing. Maybe I hope I'm not wasting your time. But if they...
Commissioner, by definition, you can't waste my time.
Oh, okay. SUNY CUNY, CUNY was one of my alma maters anyway, CUNY. NVRA, that you're saying if you receive state money, you must do this. Private colleges receive state money too.
It's not, the finding was that the SUNY and CUNY institutions were an alter ego of the state of New York and were really state
all right.
agencies.
Because they're completely paid for by the state,
They
all right.
sort of took a page out of some of the state court rulings that dealt with open meetings and FOIL in regard to that aspect.
Because I think any school I ever went to always got some kind of state money somewhere. Yeah, that's what they need.
Greg, is there anything you wanted to add on this?
Not really. Thank you.
All right, then, well, thank you for the legal report. We'll turn to election operations, and Ms. Pizzaro.
Thank you, Commissioners. We have a few items to add to the written report that we provided. We have an update in that we requested that counties certify to us their complete transition to optical scan voting systems. We have 15 counties that have done that to date. We're hoping to speak to a number of them at the conference that begins later today in Lake Placid to point out that this needs to be done. The deadline we gave them was July 23rd, I believe. It's funny that in the 15 counties, not all of them were the full pilot counties, so we have some new counties in there that are done, but full pilot counties that haven't exactly signed on yet. So we're just going to make sure that everybody understands what we're expecting by way of that certification. We did modify the Bill of Rights to accommodate the results of the infamous Chautauqua lawsuit from late last year, in that voters are directed to wait for a message that their ballots have been successfully scanned. And also, we modified some language with regard to the overvote. So that form was in your packet for information purposes. We will be sending that Bill of Rights off for translation in Chinese, Korean, and Spanish, and then once we get those translations back, we'll distribute the masters to all of the counties, and they can select which versions they need to make available to their voters. We do have weekly phone calls. We'll be having our third phone call with Nassau County tomorrow. We're hoping for some more detail from them. We do keep telling them what we're looking for, and they report in a narrative form, so I'm not sure that we're getting everything that we want, but we do follow up with each of those reports by phone. And we have a bipartisan core team there that either 3 or 4 people that are on the phone with us when we have those phone calls, and the next one will be tomorrow afternoon. We had delivered to us central count absentee voting system from Dominion. It hasn't been demoed for us yet, but they, I believe we got their application this morning, Bob? So we'll be contacting them for a date for a demo. Obviously, the conference was going to impact who they had available to do that. And we don't want to defer any of their staff from EMS training and installations that they're doing to demo this system for us. It's clearly not something that we envision getting used this year, so there is time to move forward with that at a later date. We, as Kim pointed out, have no objections or specs with regard to the documentation that was filed from the state convention, so all of that information is on our website. John and his team make that available. And I don't think I have anything else. Joe, do you have anything that we might have missed?
Anna, some of the county commissioners have been asking about the interpretation of 9-106 in the election law, and on whether or not it is required that they manually count the number of ballots that have been scanned at the close of the polls on Election Day. And would you just explain what the State Board's position is on that issue?
We did get into this a little bit at the January conference, but I'd be happy to. I don't think that anybody in this room has ever interpreted that provision in statute to address ballots that were already canvassed, and ballots that have been scanned clearly have been counted. We have never advanced any position that indicates that ballots at the end of the night, which could number up to 2,500 in these scanners, would then be manually hand counted and divided up by boards, by election district, et cetera, at the end of a 16-hour election day. We've never purported that that was our position. It's illogical. It makes the conduct of the 3% audit impossible, since you're auditing the scanner and all of the ballots that that scanner counted. So there may still be some question out there. Maybe we can clarify it at the conference. I know that there's some proposed legislation that's working its way through the Assembly and Senate that does help clarify that, maybe put a finer point on the concept that that really dealt with ballots that had not been counted. They were ballots that had been simply dropped in a ballot box, never been scanned, never been hand counted, never had been canvassed, if you will. That's not the provision that, that interpretation of that provision clearly would not impact ballots that have been scanned on election day.
Bob has corrected me that it's 9108.
Oh.
Is the provision. But I agree, and even if the legislation that clarifies it shouldn't be adopted, I think we're all in agreement that the current statute really applies to ballots put in the emergency ballot box, but not in a scanner.
Right.
That where the ballots have already been counted by the scanner, it's not necessary to count them on the close of the polls by hand.
I don't mean to speak for my colleagues, but we've never had that kind of an interpretation or conversation here. Our ballot reconciliation process does not work that way. The election day procedures that we have don't get laid out that way, so I don't know why some county boards might be interpreting that a bit differently, other than in the old world, you had a lever machine, votes were counted, you might have had a box with emergency ballots in it. Those ballots would have to be reconciled before they could be canvassed. Clearly now the ballots are canvassed, the reconciliation comes later.
Right. And of course, if the ballots are not, if there are emergency ballots that are unscanned, and they are not put into the scanner at the end of the day, which is an option that the counties have, then of course they would have to count the unscanned emergency ballots that would go into the envelope.
Right, those
And
would be
that's
hand
what-
canvassed and reported on a tally sheet, and then those numbers would be added to the tapes that come out of the scanner.
But if the ballots have actually gone through the scanner and been counted by the scanner, then they don't have to be hand counted at the close of the polls. All right.
And one quick thing, and for clarification for people who might not know, we were talking about modifying a voter's Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Rights of the United States.
Yes, well, yeah, I'd be happy to take a shot at that too if you want, but
I don't think we have that much,
And that's a bill that was just signed by the
Right,
governor.
I know,
Right.
but when we say the Bill of Rights, it kind of sounds like,
yes, it is the voter's Bill of Rights.
Must be the caffeine in the coffee.
All right, anything else for Anna?
Just on that point, we were just getting a little muddy there towards the end. Is the boards have to reconcile? They have to, and Anna referred to it briefly. So you do have to know how many ballots were counted. You still determine how many ballots went to the polling place, how many were voted, how many were unused. You still do that
Yes.
same reconciliation.
But you don't have to open
You don't
the
have to do it on
scanner
election night,
and
no.
physically
No.
Count
out.
2,000
I just wanted to make
ballots.
that clear because it looks like we weren't figuring out how many ballots were used. It's like, well,
Right.
Oh,
no.
no.
We are doing
Yes,
that. There is a
Yes.
process, and both 106 and 108 work together
Right.
to make that determination.
I think the issue, Todd,
Yeah.
is that there are some people who are saying that at the close of the polls, you have to open the scanner and hand count the number
No,
of ballots
no.
counted by the scanner to reconcile it against
No,
the
that wouldn't make
scanner
any
number.
sense, because under the plain reading of 108, that's for if you're actually canvassing the ballots.
Right,
That
that's
is
what
not
it is.
occurring.
They want to know.
So we're all in
at the end of the
agreement
night
on
who
that,
voted
and
me.
I wanted to, make it clear
Yes.
that all of us at the state board are of the position that it's not necessary to hand count the ballots that have actually been scanned at
be
the
a very
close of
long
the
night.
polls on election. Right. All right.
Thank you.
Anything else for election operations? Then we'll turn to NVRA and public information. John Conklin.
Well, for once, actually, I have nothing to add to my written report.
All right, and I don't think there was anything significant. Why don't you just summarize the key parts? We're still doing the disability access monitoring of the counties, and it's basically done, and that there are no issues, right?
Correct.
Bless you.
Okay.
But there are a few counties that have not completed their, I think we're at 15 poll sites that were not accessible. I think we're down to
7.
7. So we continue to work with those counties and keep working to reduce the number to hopefully be at 0.
All right, well, thank you, John. Then we turn to campaign finance. Elizabeth Hogan.
Thank you, Commissioner. Basically, the written report that I submitted to the commissioners it stands by itself. It outlines briefly what the units have been doing within campaign finance over the past month. The only thing I'd add to it would be a reference, as Bob made, to the Election Commissioners Conference. Bill and I will be attending the conference, making ourselves available to talk about campaign finance. You know, there were a number of new forms that were created and presented to the commissioners at our own conference in April, and we would like to be available to discuss those with them and any other questions that they have about materials that we hand out at our own conference. We also want to point out that July 15th is a filing date, and we certainly will be asking the election commissioners to assist us in urging that those filings be timely made for the several reasons that we certainly espouse the availability of that information to the public in as timely a manner as possible, but on the other hand, we're also on the other back end of it trying to minimize the enforcement proceeding that we'll have to bring against the people who don't file. So we'll be talking to them about that, and as well, at the end of the Election Commissioners Conference will be the last of the regularly scheduled seminars that we give every year, and which I referenced in the written report. Bill's going to present at that, and I'm hoping that it will be an opportunity for commissioners who did not have an opportunity maybe to attend one of the other conferences near them or in their own county even, to come and be able to ask any kind of information that they want. And we've also asked them to foster any participation that they could to build up attendance there. So with that, I think that summarizes basically what we're doing. Bill, do you want to add anything?
Sure, if I can just take a moment, I'd like to introduce Frank Malatesta and have him stand up. He's our intern for the current semester from Albany Law School, 2L. And Frank is very energetic. He's a great resource, does wonderful research, which is always a luxury when you can have someone go do all the research that you wish you had the time to do. So it's a very good help, and we appreciate his kind services, and he'll be here for the corpus of July, and then he's getting married, so yeah. Wishing him all the best.
Great. Well, welcome,
Thank you.
Frank.
Thank
you. All right, well, so if anything else for campaign finance? Then we'll turn to George Stanton.
Afternoon, Commissioners. I wasn't here last week, so you were spared my voluminous report of acronyms and gobbledygook, but I can forward it to you if you miss it. But I can just give you kind of a quick rundown. It's sort of the lull between the storms here for ITU as well as a lot of other units. So we've been taking the time to, we've been updating and simplifying some of the campaign finance reports that run on the web to make them run more efficiently. We were having some issues with people locking up reports on the web when they were running large reports, so we've been rebuilding some of them. Seems to be working much better now. Of course, we do our daily performance and issue monitoring for Nysboe, with the networks, the applications, the VPNs between the counties and the state. We did a health check at the end of May last year for the whole system, and to make sure everything was running well. We, last weekend, staff came in over the weekend and shut down the system, applied all the latest patches and updates and everything, so it's should be good now for the upcoming election season. We've assisted several counties with, some have moved their offices, some have moved equipment, some have updated equipment, and that always requires, working together with our VPN staff and their county IT staff to get things back up and running again. We assisted with setting up the auditors downstairs so that they could have access to their emails and their internet, all of that kind of stuff, the federal auditors, that is. And we also accompanied them to the DR site so that they could do some inventory checks on the system down there, and of course with the system here as well. So that's pretty much basically what we've been working on.
All right, thank you, George. Anything else? Then we'll turn to old business, discussion on the MOVE Act.
Start.
MOVE Act, at our last, we approved the funding process and authorized Todd and I to work with OGS to proceed with the contracting. That's moving along in that process. We're hoping it will be completed within the next week or 10 days at least from the getting all the paperwork over to the state controller's office for that portion of the state contract. We also worked to finalize this, at the time, the way the Federal Voting Assistance Program asked us to create a state scope of work, which we did. And then we modified it to take out the stuff they told us to put in because they changed their mind on what they wanted the state scope of work to look like. So for the portion that the federal government may pick up for us, they've firmed up our scope, they sent it out to the vendors, those responses are coming in, and Todd and I are scheduled to go down and review those responses on the 29th of June. To hopefully they will match up with the same vendor that we selected. The federal program, because of time and money, is only giving a portion of the compliance mechanism. We still need the portion that the state picked up. So we're hoping that they're parallel tracks and they'll come together at the end. So that is moving along. We also are giving a presentation on Thursday in the afternoon, a workshop on the proposed solution, so we can, not our proposed solution, but a proposed solution, as to just walk the counties through how it will impact their actual programming. So we have a slide presentation, actually take them through how a voter would interact with the system, how the staff at the board would interact with the steps through actually assigning a ballot and making the information sent out to the voter, and then the response back from the voter. So we're doing what we can. We're still limited on some of the, since the procurement is still in the process, what we can say about the actual vendor that we're working on, other than these are, the steps are pretty much uniform. How a vendor approaches the steps is kind of, the steps are pretty uniform throughout all the vendors. It's just how their system tweaks it a little bit.
Yeah.
So we're on track for getting this done for the primary.
We're good. Right. We still have to get the contract in place before we can do the training. So
and that's, we have a June 30th and July 14th or 15th, the two milestone dates.
well, our dates are in July 15th, and July 30th, and we're
Right.
to.
Oh.
I mean, the federal
Those
law
are
is we
milestones.
have to be up and running
Yeah.
for the general. We're hoping to be up and running for the primary.
That's been our target.
Right.
Yeah.
And
And the key will be
Still-
communicating this to the counties, because the counties will have to do most of the work, right?
Right.
And that's from our workshop, we're giving it's not the training level, but it's a little above training level so that the commissioners can see what the tasks are and start identifying who their employees, need to be in order to do the regional training. We're going to do regional training and fill in as necessary depending on the dates when we do the training. County can either go to the training in their region or another region if that works better for them. And if we have to do more training, we'll get that done.
Are you going to speak to them about this at the conference?
Yes.
Good. I think they need to hear it.
Oh, yes.
It's the counties that aren't at the conference that
That-
are
yes,
the
then you'll
greatest
have to
concern.
send-
That's always a problem. We're still going to have to get the
Try to
same
get their
information
name, well,
out
send
again as
something
well.
out, a
Well,
memorandum
we'll
or
send out
something.
the slide presentation to all the counties so that
Soon
at least
as
they get it in
possible.
the
But
PDF.
getting some of that live feedbacks helps us to make sure that
Absolutely.
we may need to clarify things when we send it to people who weren't there, that does help when you get the little give
Oh,
and
I'm
take.
sure the counties are feeling overwhelmed. you
And if
know,
we
there's
have to
nothing
do a
like about it.
webinar, I mean, we could do
So
a
we-
web training if we need to, if we can't put the two groups together.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we have not yet received a formal ruling on the waiver request, but we expect it.
We received a request for some additional information, mostly, what are the contingency, the question that the feds asked us, what are the contingency to ensure that the ballots really go out 32 days before the general election? And the governor had signed the MOVE Act, which I believe is Chapter 104, around the same time we got the question. So we reminded them of what the current statute said and what the new statute provided for contingencies to get the ballots out. And, and I think they were concerned about, the appearance of the ballot. The counties will have the ability when they make their PDF of their ballot, whether they do it on their own EMS system or whether they contract out like a bed sheet ballot
Right.
at a vendor, that once they get that PDF approved, that can be attached and sent to the voter. You don't have to wait for the 3 or 4 days for them to actually print the ballot and
Yeah,
ship
you
you the
can make
ballot
it.
before you give the ballot out. So that should allow enough time
Do
to
we
get
see
out.
any
So we
kind
answered their
of-
question. I don't know when we'll get their answer.
Do we see any kind of a, copy of that, of an idea of what they're doing, what that ballot will look like? Because are they going to be a little different in each county, do you think, or are they all going to be exactly
Well,
the same?
Well, it's 8.5 wide by the
I know
length
that,
that's
yeah.
necessary, so,
And they'll be using the EMS system.
right.
Yeah.
We know
They're
what the
all
ballots,
using
we
the
know what the
same
ballot's
EMS
going to look
system.
like.
So you don't have to, you
Yeah,
didn't check
we're
it
not-
or anything,
no.
that's up to them at that point?
No, they already have to do their proofreading for that, so.
Oh, I know they do,
Yeah,
but I
no.
was just wondering if we still had another role we had to play.
Not an additional role.
I mean, what we envision, I know Anna and Joe have talked about it, and we have, we still have a few machines that need to be acceptance tested from New York City. We anticipate a new order for some additional machines, and our staff will have to acceptance test them, but we also want to make.
Surplus machines.
Well, a certain number of machines.
Yeah, but it's-
But it's maybe 800 or less.
That's still enough.
But they have enough to run this primary, but they want some more machines that they claim will get that purchase order soon. And we're just trying to calculate out the days, because the staff also, we want to make sure that they're available to answer questions to counties as they're, actually going through the EMS. We're doing EMS training as a refresher class,
Yeah.
but, you get questions as they're actually sitting down doing the layout. And we just try to make sure that we have the staff allocated during that period of time to do both jobs.
Excuse me. Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to new business. The first item of new business is the amendment to Part 6212.9 of the regulations. That's tab 3 of our binders. And this is just a technical correction to have the poll book conform now to the new ballot scanning system as opposed to lever machine public counter numbers, right?
Yes.
All right, so is there any discussion on the resolution?
Move for approval?
All right, those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, it's adopted.
Well,
And,
It's got to go.
Yeah, it's not fine yet, just,
So now it's going to go out
Start
for
the process.
publication.
yeah.
Okay.
Unless commissioners
The draft.
It's a
who wish to adopt it
As a
on an
consensus.
emergency basis. Or, the difficult, you could also, Commissioner Kellner, adopt it on a consensus basis, but as you know, were anyone to object, that would be the end of that.
We assume there'll be comments, so.
All right, so we're going to put it out for
Put it
comment.
through the SAPA process.
But
We all know and love so
But
dearly.
in view of the fact that the statute now is already in place requiring the scanners, it is our position that this regulation is now, that the old regulation is anachronistic, and therefore,
It's going to supersede the existing regulation anyway.
well, that the county should go ahead and act on the basis of the new regulation, even though it hasn't been formally adopted, because their books should be referring to the stub numbers rather than the public counter numbers.
And I don't think anybody's been putting height or eye color in a poll book for a long time.
Right.
Right, and I think the wording is vague enough that we can, on our own, make the change, but it would be good to clean it up in the long run.
It should be done.
Right. We wanted to clean up the
Right.
regulation to conform to the statute and the actual practice, but we're all agreed that the old regulation is anachronistic and that the county should be preparing their poll books to conform to the
The
new
only
text.
the only thing that I saw as a question for me was that they have to be, I think it's 24, 25, 20, the date of the election for which the list is prepared. Are they going to have to be prepared every year now?
Well, that appears on the page now.
Yeah.
Right.
So that,
It does appear on the.
So that the book,
the book has on that page.
Oh, I
so,
didn't
you-
realize that.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, when you pull out the signature, if you're
Yeah.
copying the page, you know
Yeah.
what book
Okay,
it
they
comes
listed
out
it.
of.
But so it won't be a new one every year then?
It is a
Every-
new
every-
one.
every
These are the
election.
poll books.
I
These
know
are-
that, they weren't new ones every year, they used to.
Oh,
Yes, they were.
well,
used
They have to
no,
be
no,
printed.
no, they
Under
used
the,
to
under the
add
buff
pages,
cards.
huh?
Under the buff cards.
But the
Right.
buff cards went out in 1990.
Yeah, and
But with the buff
nobody-
card, the
nobody uses
inspector,
those.
after you sign, they would put the date of the election
Yes,
in that,
yes,
and
that.
on the buff card.
Right, right.
So
And now
Now
what
they
was
don't need
hand
the bu-
done on
okay,
election
all
day
right.
with the buff card is done
I stand
electronically.
corrected, but that sort of worried me.
I
I
know
thought,
what
is
you're
this
saying.
going to be a task every single year? But it is.
It is.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
have to print the book. They
Right.
have to print the poll book, and they usually do it about 2 weeks before
I
each.
didn't think it was a task. I got it.
Okay.
Because there used to be an awful lot of people in the back.
No, real buff.
Let me see if you're in the back.
No, the backside with all the little scribbles.
Yeah.
From the
All right, so we have approved the regulation for publication, and we're urging the counties to comply with it in advance of the formal approval. Next item is the resolution to approve the affidavit ballot envelopes. Todd, you want to just explain, we had the statute this year, and we have, the form has been circulated, and I think there's one change to the form, right?
Yeah, there's one,
Go ahead.
To both.
it goes to both, but it's the same language. There was, and we weren't able
All
to do
right,
this.
so let's start with the statute,
Yeah.
that Chapter 62 this year
Right now
requires that the affidavit ballot envelope be used as a voter registration form, so even if the person had not previously registered, by filling out the affidavit ballot, they will become registered. Most of the counties have already been doing this, but
Yes.
most notably, New York City has not.
Right.
So that's the real purpose
Just for
of
clarity
this.
too, it's a prospective thing, it's not for that particular, like, a lot of people have asked us.
Right, it's not the same as
Right.
same-day registration.
Right.
A lot
That's
of
a good
people have
question.
asked us that, and it's, no, it's for
I
the,
can imagine why they would, yeah.
yeah.
I think the only thing new from that is the affidavit-only side, if you claim to change the party, whether or not you can open the envelope then hasn't changed. But that oath side where you claimed a new party could serve as a change of enrollment. So it doesn't change the oath side, it only changes how the county treats the oath side.
I'm not sure I understand that.
I understood what
Well,
they're-
if they show up as, per se, say a Democrat primary, or Republican primary, and they claim to be enrolled in the party, by filling out the oath. I claim I'm an enrolled member of the party, and they sign it.
Okay.
And you come back and you find
Oh.
that they really weren't enrolled. Well, you don't count their ballot, but you could use that side now
Right,
as
but
a
it's
change
now a
of
change of
enrollment.
enrollment.
As opposed to saying, you weren't enrolled in the party, here, fill out this piece of paper. And then whenever it comes back, we'll treat it as the change of enrollment. It doesn't-
Going forward.
I think now we understand it. Yes, so it's.
So it's a change in
So much for my
practice, not-
clarification.
All right,
But
so the resolution now, like,
But then the language.
there was
you
one
do
change on the
change.
form that we have here, right?
Right,
So
now
Todd,
just-
do you want to explain it?
Yeah, we need to, since this is a registration form that we're adopting, there's one small change that we need to put in, it's box 11 on the form of the envelope. That's it to you. We have to put a little footnote in there to note, as we do on our voter registration form, except the Independence Party, which permits non-enrolled voters to vote in their primary elections. That's something we,
And that's something we have to do because of the
Pursuant-
consent order.
right. So.
All right, so with that correction,
Right.
is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Any more discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, it is approved. All right. Next item is the discussion of the ES&S engineering change orders. And that's tab 5. We have the memorandum.
Yeah.
This doesn't require a vote, it's informational, the changes
Use your
were
memorandum.
completely innocuous.
So you just put this here so the commissioners would
Be aware
know
that,
that there were engineering changes.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
if they're gonna, and these are all minor hardware issues with components of the parts that election operations has determined do not make any functional or computer changes and therefore don't need additional testing or approval.
right.
Okay, so noted. All right.
May I interrupt? In tandem with that, we had mentioned in our unit report that we were testing, a number of commissioners had requested on the Dominion system that the voting position appear as an oval rather than a square. And when we prepared our monthly update, we were in the midst of that testing, and we indicated we thought it would be completed, and it is. So we did provide the information that our own staff conducted with regard to functional testing of those ovals, and we also provided some documentation from SysTest that supports our position that there is no negative impact on the accuracy of a voting position that is either a square or an oval in that Dominion system. The option to select the shape of that position is an EMS. It's a function of the EMS. It's a decision that the staff that's programming, that is configuring
For
the
Dominion.
ballot makes at the time
For
of
the
that
image cast,
configuration.
right?
Excuse me?
That's just for the image cast where it's.
Right, right.
Did you have a report that was for anybody?
I
that went to
emailed
the-
that to you
to
and
the-
Bob yesterday. We indicated we'd be sharing it with the board today.
There was a written report that I saw.
Well, I know when Pat and I were out last year, remember Pat, they said they preferred the oval constantly in every place we went.
Well, ES&S only allows an oval,
Right.
and some of the usability tests have indicated that the oval is slightly more usable than the squares. My suggestion is that this not be a county option, that the staff here should confer and just have them do it one way or the other.
Well, wherever we
That-
went.
That we shouldn't have some counties using boxes and
Yes.
other counties using ovals.
I agree.
And the fact that ES&S already requires ovals would suggest that maybe we'd be better if just everybody used ovals. I'm not sure why the county should have the option to decide between ovals and boxes.
I think the statute says they can choose ovals or boxes.
I don't think it says the counties can choose. I think it, well,
Ballots.
it does provide for ovals or the statute, the language does provide for ovals or boxes as part of the broader framework of what's authorized. But I would just urge that we try to have uniformity and not have,
And Kim, if we really
People doing
believe
it
that one
differently.
is more usable than the other for the voter, I think we sort of have an obligation to pick the more usable one.
Well, I just think that the counties themselves, and maybe I'm wrong, I
But
think.
we visited Tarpon counties, not all of them by no means, and every place we went last year, they said the oval is better. People don't like the square. I don't know
Although very
why.
few counties use the ovals.
Yeah, well,
But-
they didn't have them, many of them. They just had the square, but they
Look,
said
I
they
have no,
wanted.
I have no,
don't
I have no
care either.
problem, but I just think you're gonna have some counties that are comfortable with squares that are
Yeah.
gonna say,
Unfortunately, I didn't see it in the places that we visited, you know?
I don't,
All right.
I personally
Because they were
don't
saying
care.
people would fill it in, and that a lot of them, with the square, they were outside the square, and whether or not it mattered, they were afraid they wouldn't be counted. You know, they thought because they went too far out. And the oval is easier to stay within. I know it's silly, it's a silly argument, but the oval was easier for people to stay within, because they're not this big, they're little tiny things. And it was easier to stay, somehow, people thought who were voting, that it would be easier to stay within an oval. And that was, we heard it from practically every place we went. And we were all upstate here, we were upstate, we weren't downstate.
I'm not going to vote unless it's a diamond shape.
I went star.
all right, I think we've had enough of this discussion.
Sorry.
The next matter are campaign enforcement determinations. Does anybody want to have a public discussion of any of the determinations? Or a executive session discussion? All right, then the motion before us is to approve the determinations as proposed on the agenda.
So
Those in
moved.
favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Is there anything we need to do in?
Meeting date, next meeting.
All right, next meeting date. I think we were discussing Tuesday, August 3rd. And, all right, so we're, and then we still want to have a discussion in executive session on campaign finance enforcement issues.